Hi, we're Quaint and Curious Volumes, and today I'm going to give you a book review of a 20-year-old book called Blood Done Sign My Name by Timothy B. Tyson. I started reading this in February as part of a group of books for Black History Month, which is February here in the United States. This was published in 2004, and it's the subtitle is A True Story. It's a combination of memoir and history. Timothy B. Tyson was born in 1959, and his father was a Methodist minister. Methodist ministers, well, Methodism is a pretty prominent branch of Protestant Christianity here in North Carolina and in the South in general. Baptist branches are more popular, it seems, but there's a lot of Methodist churches, and Methodist ministers tend to be more trained, more highly trained. They need more education to get installed into a church. There's a lot more organization where Baptists can kind of set up their own shop and split off into different branches. Anyway, I don't. You don't come to me to tell you all about different branches of Christianity. What I will say, this book, if you are interested in the history of the civil rights movement, if you're interested in the history of North Carolina, in New South issues, uh, race relations along the color line, definitely worth reading. So the central incident in this book took place in 1970 when the author was about 11 years old. And in the town that he lived in, there was a murder that was committed out in public. Four white men killed a black man for really nothing. There are questions about whether he had, as the all too common accusation was about black men in the South, that he said something to a white woman, something untoward, and that inspired a group of white men to chase him down in the street, beat him brutally, and then shoot him. They also shot another black man who was nearby. The fellow who was killed was named Henry Marrow. He was in his early 20s. He was I think he had been in the army. And the man who's most likely was the killer was a man named Robert Teal, who was a barber and a merchant in the area for a long time, and had a reputation for being very violent for his whole life. So how Tyson comes into it? Well, he was growing up in the town. His one of his playmates, one of his good friends, was the son of Robert Teal, and announced it to little Timothy Tyson, one afternoon what his father had done. Robert Teal and his co-defendants were all acquitted of the murder, and there was a period of civil unrest in the small town of Oxford, North Carolina, in the period after that. Well, this book also talks about other incidents in North Carolina's civil rights history, including the Greensboro sit-ins at Woolworth, probably the most famous civil rights incident in North Carolina. That was in 1960. A group of college students tried to, well, not forcibly, they tried to, using civil disobedience, go sit down and be served at the lunch counter at a Woolworths in downtown Greensboro, North Carolina. And they were refused service at first and resisted by the white patrons. It went on for some time. It's in a lot of the history books. Some things that are not as often written about in the history books were the Wilmington Massacre of 1898, when white supremacists basically overthrew the government of Wilmington, North Carolina, because it was too friendly to blacks. It was too integrated. There was a sort of they called it a fusion. It wasn't a party, but it was a sort of an alliance between liberal white citizens and black Republicans. Most blacks were Republicans in those days. So the democratic power structure resisted that with force and with firepower and killed a bunch of people. In Wilmington, we still don't really know how many. There's pretty widely differing estimates between 14 and 300. In this book, I learned about that. Also, there was the Greensboro massacre in the later 70s. It's a whole other story, which I'll talk about at some point when I get a good book about that to read and to talk to you about. There were some other fascinating people in here. Vernon Tyson, the father of Tim Tyson, a lifelong Methodist minister. It's a beautiful picture of him and the ways that he tried to lead his congregation in Oxford through the civil rights era. He was more liberal on race issues than most of his parishioners, and some of them resisted him in various ways. After this central incident, they were forced to leave Oxford and take up a post at a church in another town in Wilmington, actually. And there's a lot of facts about Tyson's history, his ancestors, many of whom were ministers, some of whom were in the Klan, some of whom were both. So, it's not, no one has a 100% clean history in this story. Tim Tyson himself has a period of sort of involvement in counterculture endeavors, and he lives on a tiny little commune out in eastern North Carolina for a while before he goes to college and then grad school. And while he's in grad school, he decides that he's going to write the history of this incident because it had been largely buried. Even the newspaper accounts had disappeared. It's really an interesting story. There's also a fascinating character named Thad Stem, who was the local writer in Oxford, North Carolina. He says Oxford's only known author, although no, I guess there's two, even though Tyson doesn't live there. But Thad Stem, who was, I don't know, I guess kind of maybe sort of a beatnik kind of guy, who was friends with Tyson's dad, Vernon, and was an influence on Tim Tyson, gave him books to read, and encouraged him to write about his own, to tell his own stories. So, this book, highly recommend it. There was a passage at the end that did actually move me to tears, something that has not happened for me for years. I mean, and I usually doesn't happen for me for books, not for decades. So there you go. Anyway, highly recommend Blood Done Sign My Name by Timothy B. Tyson. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you again later. Bye.